Welcome back to Doc Lale Talks Comics. Welcome to my new setup here, guys. I know that I have done a video or two before at the old house, sitting on a tripod, and this is my way of starting a whole new thing. So I hope you guys enjoy this. The next few videos I've got are all going to be set up the same sort of way. So let me know down in the comments what you think. By the way, speaking of what you think, this setup gives me some more room to actually show you the books that we're talking about. And tonight, we're going to talk about what if Spider-Man saved Gwen Stacy. So, Spidey didn't save Gwen Stacy originally. And it caused him a lifetime of pain, and he's missed her every day since then. But what if he did? Wouldn't that open up a whole different can of worms? And that's what this story, just like the one about if Uncle Ben had lived rather than Aunt May. It's not necessarily the same can of worms, it's different. And you actually have artwork by Gil Kane and Frank Giacoa. So they brought in the original penciler for Amazing Spider-Man 121 and one of the inkers that had inked a lot of Gil Kane's stuff during that time. So they wanted it to look like an actual issue of the Amazing Spider-Man. So they show you what happened originally. They show you the death of Gwen Stacy at the hands of Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. And then, of course, you get the infamous Watcher that brought you all of the what if stories before he became a plot device in the MCU. So what does happen in this story? Peter saves Gwen. He proceeds to trounce on Norman Osborn, but Norman gets what he feels is the upper hand because where did it go? Because Peter falls and Gwen falls. And even though Peter shielded her with his body, the Goblin is obsessed that nobody could survive a fall from that height at the top of the George Washington, aka Brooklyn Bridge. So he leaves, successful in his mind that he killed Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. Peter manages to give Gwen CPR because she's not breathing. And she wakes up, and you get the first big hurdle that Peter has got to come over. At the time of her death, in the main book, Gwen Stacy was upset with Spider-Man because she felt that he was responsible for George Stacy's death at the end of issue 90 of ASM. She felt like Spider-Man didn't save her father, and he could have. So here he has to overcome that hurdle by explaining to her what happened and that her father knew that he was Spider-Man. And he asked Peter to take care of Gwen. And Peter promised him that he would. And he says, I know I haven't done a good job of that up till now, but things are going to change. And so they decided to tackle being back together in this new universe. And Spidey decides to tackle the Green Goblin and his henchmen. And in that instance, then you see him go through 1,000 different men, it feels like, just to get to the Goblin. He's intent on killing the Goblin. And Norman Osborn says, hey, what happens when somebody finds out who you are? Nobody will be safe. And he says, really? You just tried to kill my girlfriend and now you're going to threaten me with that all over again? That's going to make it a lot easier for me to kill you. Well, he escapes. He goes back home to his son, Harry Osborn, and he says, you know, Dad, why don't you give up being a goblin? And he says, you want me to give up that? You're a sniveling weakling. And so they keep fighting. Spider-Man finds him because he knows who Norman is, as well as Norman knows who he is. And in the end, Norman Osborn seems to turn good, and he walks away. And Harry says, you know, we need a little time to sort this thing out. You'll never regret giving us that time. You've got my word on it. And he says, you'll always be welcome in our house, but right now, if you don't mind, I'd like to be alone with my dad. So Peter and Gwen are going to get married. And this is going to change the course of both of their lives. Because at the wedding, J. Jonah Jameson busts in and says, hey, I've got a package that the Goblin sent to me that proves that you're Peter Parker and Spider-Man one and the same. And Aunt May falls out. Meanwhile, here comes the cops to arrest Peter on his wedding day. And he eventually crashes out of a window, and that leads to J. Jonah Jameson and Robbie Robertson getting into an altercation because JJJ says, that man should have been, he was laughing at my face every time that I paid him for pictures of himself. And Robbie says, you know, that's not like that, man. It's not like that at all. You weren't just a boss, you were more than that. He saved your skin a dozen times. And J. Jonah Jameson decided to print it in the paper who Spider-Man is. So we're left with a Gwen Stacy that's married to a Peter Parker that's on the run. And Peter, in the epilogue, is trying to decide, how am I going to be hunted down like some sort of beast that has to be destroyed? Or will I become the very menace that Jameson has always claimed that I am, just to survive? So this book has got just as much weight behind it as the other What If book that I talked about previously, when I talked about had Uncle Ben survived instead of Aunt May. So I hope that you've enjoyed this look into this book. It's kind of like the Batman story that J.M. DeMatteis did last year. What if Robin had survived? What if Jason Todd had survived rather than dying at the hands of the Joker? It's one of those that you could do infinite issues of what if, what could have been. You know, I saw that John Byrne actually did a non-Marvel sanctioned continuation of the X-Men years ago on his online forums, and now that's coming to pass that Marvel itself is going to release that. It's kind of a what if, you know, what if John Byrne had stayed on the title instead of Chris Claremont, and what direction would Byrne have taken the X-Men in? So just some food for thought, guys. If you've never read this book was What If, issue number 24 from 1980. Tony Isabella was the writer. Again, Gil Kane and Frank Gaico were the artists. So, oddly enough, and I think that is odd, I saw that Denny O'Neil was the editor. And I thought Denny O'Neil was a fine editor on Spider-Man, whereas he couldn't write his way out of a paper bag when he wrote the main title. So, but what I was going to say is this old What If series had a lot of really good issues that tackled stuff that people actually wanted to know. So a What If title for today would be, What If Peter and Mary Jane got back together? So food for thought, guys. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the new setup. And once again, let me know in the comments what you did think. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful evening.